Jen, it's Fantasy Festivus. Time to air your fantasy grievances. Who let you down this week?
This week, I would love to talk about Kyle Generational Talent Pitts. So frustrating, right? Finally, we all decide to bench him, and he has the game of his career, which sadly was not even that fair. I mean, he scored 16 and a half PPR points. I mean, great outing for a tight end at this point, but yeah, super frustrating. I personally benched him for K. Dalton, which was not great and cost me a game, cost me a win. But yeah, I know I can't be the only one in the fantasy realm who did that. So now, of course, now he's back on the table and we have to, put him into lineups, and I'm sure he's going to get goose eggs and 2 points and, 3 targets and all that stuff. So yeah, kind of annoyed with Kyle Pitts this week.
It's the worst kind of fantasy bust, the one that you can't really bench, but like you need to bench.
And screwed myself.
It's frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, screw Kyle Pitts. Be good or be bad. Stop this flip-flop thing. Now let's get to the show. Welcome, everyone, to the most accurate podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Niles. With me are my excellent co-hosts, Jen Eakins and Chris Allen. Chris, you're back, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I had a fun trip out to Oklahoma City just this past week. Ready to actually dive back into the week 9 slate. I can't believe we're already at like week 9 already. The season's halfway over.
Fast. It's so fast.
Yeah. It feels like a slog, but now we're sitting here like, we're just a couple weeks away from Thanksgiving, so that's pretty cool. But otherwise, I'm doing all right. Jen, how you doing?
I'm good. For one, I'm excited that we're halfway through. I'm tired, but no, things are good. I'm enjoying some Halloween candy still. I think I've been enjoying Halloween candy for a week now, and my son came home with an enormous loot last night. So, of course I have to sample things and make sure they're okay.
Oh yeah. It's the responsible thing to do as a parent.
It is. I mean, he's 13 now, so it's not like I can sneak. He knows what's in there. But fortunately, he's a sharer, which is fantastic. Brandon, how are you? How did your Halloween go? I know you guys have been sick over there in your house.
Yeah, so luckily I was the last one to get sick, and I'm at a threat for a coughing fit at any moment this episode, but I feel good. The cough is lingering. We had fun. It was pouring rain. My girls had a really nice time anyway. We walked around the neighborhood. We got lots and lots of candy. We had a little Princess Belle, and we had a Sky, the pup from Paw Patrol. So that was for our costumes. Nice. They had a very nice time. And also, I started rewatching Seinfeld for fun, Jen. So the Fantasy Festivus now just makes me think of that.
Anytime that you would, we could do an entire pod on any episode. You could just drop any episode and I can give you it all.
So now we're talking about topics for next week's podcast when I'm not here. So there you go. You got all sorts of stuff
the entire thing.
Let's just watch the Book Detective episode. Let's just watch it for the entire episode. Let's just do that.
Mr. Bookman. I love that one. We could do like Seinfeld characters as fantasy football people.
We could draft. That's right. We're going off the rails. I'll stop this before I take us too far down the well here. Just a reminder, this is our weekly streaming episode where we'll emphasize hot pickups for the primary streaming positions. That's quarterback, tight end, kicker, and defense. Let's check out how we did last week. Our sleeper streamer of the week, which was Daniel Jones, and didn't end up very well, unfortunately. Seattle shut him down. He was 25th. Other quarterback streamers, Ryan Tannehill ends up being incomplete, although Malik Willis came in, and I said I kind of liked Willis, and if he did start, he was awful. Was as bad as you could possibly get. Cost me a matchup. And then PJ Walker at 16th. Pretty good outing for PJ Walker. He's earned that starting job, and they're going to keep going with that. So that's good. Tight end streamers, K. Dalton. Jen, K. Dalton did.
We already touched on that. We don't need to go there again.
We did. 35th. Juwan Johnson, 37th was also tough. But you also mentioned Greg Dulcich, the rookie who was tight end 8 on the week, which is fantastic. Your kickers, I think, were overall pretty solid. Jake Elliott tied for kicker 18. Jason Sanders tied for kicker 11, but the delta there, it wasn't very big. Greg Joseph struggled, kicker 26. And Jason Myers tied for the kicker 3. So kicker 3 that week, which is great. Defenses, Nick Bodiford came on. He writes the weekly streaming column over at 4for4.com. Listeners should definitely check that out. He came on and he recommended the Jacksonville Jaguars, Indianapolis Colts, and Carolina Panthers, who all tied for 17th for defense 17. Kind of a rough week for streaming, but I don't think there were better options. I think just none of the streaming options turned into phenomenal things for us. Week 9 buys, it's going to be a big streaming week because the Browns, Cowboys, Broncos, Giants, Steelers, and 49ers are all off this week. Big bye week. I know that my Dak teams, my Dak CD Lamb teams, were very excited last week and are now staring into the abyss of a bye week, unfortunately. But before I keep rambling about that and the woes of a couple of my fantasy teams, Chris, our top quarterback streamer is our sleeper streamer of the week. Who did you bring with us today to have as our sleeper streamer quarterback of the week?
So I'm going with Andy Dalton this week, and I wrote, starting the week off, starting to look at matchups like on Sunday afternoon, doing most of the analysis throughout Monday. Then, of course, we do the show today. And on Sunday and then yesterday, everything looked like Andy Dalton would be like the primary like streaming option for this week. And I'd still rank him, or at least if I had to rank them or tier them, I still would put him as my top streamer this week. But it comes with a caveat, because if folks were paying attention to the trade deadline today, I mean, the Baltimore Ravens did wind up trading for one Roquan Smith, like from the Chicago Bears, which changes the calculus just a little bit, like for Andy Dalton. Because beforehand, I mean, the Baltimore Ravens, I mean, middling in terms of quarterback pressures, but really the key matchup was just what they can do in their secondary. So if Dalton wasn't feeling a ton of pressure, he could at least take advantage of their weak secondary as of right now. I mean, 22nd, 23rd in terms of EPA allowed, like per drop back. So at least the matchup set up well for him, and especially with what Alvin Kamara has been capable of doing over the past few weeks with Dalton in the lineup. I mean, just stark differences in terms of the target shares, like for Alvin Kamara since Andy Dalton has been under center. I mean, Greg Rosenthal put out a tweet that basically just said, like, that's the reason why Andy Dalton has the job, which is absolutely true. With Jameis Winston under center, I think Alvin Kamara only had like 11, 12, 17%, somewhere in there. I mean, averaging like 23 to 24% target share, like with Dalton under center. So all of it kind of lines up for Andy Dalton to be at least the top streamer this week. But now with this little twist, this one trade, I think it does kind of change like how we can project Dalton's, I guess, upside like for this week, because he can't continually dump off the ball to Alvin Kamara, for 9, 10, 11 targets again. That'd be great. My fantasy teams would really appreciate it. But we do need some other pass catchers in the offense to step up in order for him to really take off. I mean, Chris Olave, no problems. But like Rashid Shaheed, I mean, could see him maybe pop off for another big game. We'll see if Jarvis Landry is supposed to be back this week. But now with the Ravens actually taking a shot at upgrading their defense, I mean, it requires a bit more from the Saints offense for me to be at least fully on board, like for Dalton to be the top streamer for this week.
Yeah, I like it. That Saints offense is kind of fun to watch with Andy Dalton back there, which I didn't think were words I would say this season, but it's been kind of fun to do that. And of course, Kamara was one of a slew of players with tons and tons of touchdowns for fantasy managers last week. Listeners, don't forget Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy platform. It has excellent custom settings for fantasy commissioners. You want to do dynasty, redraft, IDP, you name it. Easily accessible, wildly mobile friendly. So go download the app and join or start a league today. Chris, I know you've got more quarterbacks for us. What other quarterbacks did you bring?
I've got Marcus Mariota. So for Mariota going up against the Chargers, now the Chargers, they're coming off their bye, but still having to travel from the West Coast like to the East Coast. Not that that's a massive thing. I mean, we've seen, teams having to travel, dud out, but not really expecting that, or at least using that as a factor. Just more about the defense itself. I mean, the Chargers right now, they're 14th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, but really it's just about like their rushing defense, like so far. I mean, we've seen a number of teams being able to get over them at like 5, 6, like 7 yards per carry, at least, in being efficient, like on the ground. And with the Atlanta Falcons right now, I mean, back into the league in terms of pass rate over expectation, and even just this past week. So throughout the first half, I can understand like when the game was relatively neutral against the Panthers, Atlanta had about a negative 13% pass rate over expectation through the first half. That's fine. I mean, Arthur Smith wants to establish it. We know this. That's fine. But in the fourth quarter, just the fourth quarter, and all the chaos ensued with the PJ Walker bomb to DJ Moore, I mean, all the back and forth that happened. I mean, almost like 20 some odd points scored just in that one quarter alone. They actually passed less than expected. They were down to like a negative 14% pass rate over expectation just in that one quarter when the game was essentially on the line. So there's really no impetus for the Falcons to continue passing, or at least try and pass more, despite the fact that we saw Kyle Pitts had his first great game, like Jen was talking about earlier. So even if there is something of a shootout, so let's say Justin Herbert gets in, starts connecting more with Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, we know that Mike Williams isn't going to be there or whatever. I mean, even the shootout potential isn't really what's going to drive Marcus Mariota like as a potential fantasy streamer. It's just more about his rushing. We know that in terms of design rushing attempts, top 6, top 8 in the league amongst all quarterbacks like so far. So really that's the only thing we can hang our hat on. It's just the volume that he's going to be able to get and the fact that the Chargers haven't been able to stop the run throughout most of the season. So with that, at least he provides more upside, but at least we know with rushing, as we saw with Daniel Jones this past week, it makes his floor somewhat more volatile than we would like.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
This little graphic over here, can someone explain that? Is that ET? Like, am I just too old? What is that?
Oh no. So what happened was ET was really successful and all the other movie production companies were like, we need an ET. And so they made a really crappy one a few years later. They called it Mac and Me.
ET called Mac and Me. I didn't.
Gotcha. That makes more sense now.
Okay, so Chris, you didn't know either then, right?
No, I didn't know either. Okay. I thought I was on the ET train, but I was like, did they make a second ET and I just didn't know about it?
And I'm sorry to take us off. I just saw that. I was like, what in the world is that? All right, back to quarterbacks.
It's like whenever there's a big movie out, like they'll be like Wakanda Forever's coming out. And then later on they'll be like Shmakanda Shmamever or something. Will be like a straight to DVD release that happens at the same time. I guess I missed that.
Because I saw ET in the theater. Like I remember it very well, but I definitely do not remember the copycat. Interesting.
It was a few years later and is just as much quality as it looks as though it is.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Your expectations looking at that picture are spot on. Absolutely. Chris, if Cordero Patterson, who we don't know if he's going to be activated yet, but he is eligible to be activated this week, and it's possible if he plays, does that change anything for Mariota? Is that better? Is it worse? Is it the same?
I would say that it's neutral. I mean, it provides another pass catching option like for Mariota because we know he's not going to throw it more to Drake London or anything like that. And at least it eliminates some of like the bad pass catchers that he was throwing to just this past week. So I would say that if he has like more efficient options to throw to, should he choose to on like, let's say the 15-ish attempts he's probably going to make in the game, then so much the better. But we were already at least somewhat concerned about, Tyler Algier, Caleb Huntley, like any of those guys, like taking over the rushing touchdowns. I would say that Cordero Patterson coming back would just cannibalize their production versus completely taking away anything that Marcus Mariota would be able to provide us.
That makes sense. Anybody else for us? The graphic is I say that like the graphic's not staring right at us. But,
right. Yeah. Taylor Heinicke. So, I mean, the dude's a gamer. I mean, it looks like it's, at least from what we see, like week in and week out, doesn't have the strongest arm, but at least his scrambling is there. I mean, it's always the superlatives that you have to try with them. He's got moxie, he's got grit, he keeps the Commanders in games, blah, 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 blah. But at the very least, I mean, he is capable of continuing to move the ball down the field. I mean, we saw Terry McLaurin's target share has increased over the past couple of weeks with him back under center. Curtis Samuel still getting his. The only problem is the Minnesota, who they're playing against, their defensive front. They are able to get to Kyler Murray on a number of plays, which is surprising considering we would expect Kyler Murray to be the scrambling type, capable of eluding most of the pressure. I mean, but taking 4 sacks on 14 pressures just on Sunday, that's something of a concern. But if we look at over the entire season, Kyler Murray's pressure to sack ratio is something that Sports Info Solutions tracks. It's actually fairly high. So it's something of a concern. We're hoping that now with DeAndre Hopkins, it'll start to come back down. But at least knowing with Taylor Heinicke, with Heinicke specifically, knowing that he has those pass catchers in front of him, McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and now also seeing more work for both Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic, He has those pass catching options there in front of him so that he should be able to at least elude some of the pressure, and also scrambling keeps drives alive as well. So I would say that while it's more of a lower end play, just because we don't technically see as much rushing production from Heinicke as we usually do. Got a rushing score this past week. You can't expect it. Overall, though, against the Minnesota Vikings, who are, if I'm remembering correctly, let's say 19th, 20th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, it's at least a decent matchup if you're in a deeper streaming type, if you need a deeper streaming option.
Sure. Yeah, I like that. Taylor Heinicke. People, my favorite one is my favorite superlative, which means nothing, is he plays the right way. I always hear that. It means absolutely nothing.
It doesn't mean anything, but it's just like he does all of the things. Like if you look at his highlights, it's like, oh yeah, I want that type of quarterback on my team. And then when he's on your team, he's like, oh yeah, I don't like that anymore.
Yeah, I don't like that. We need somebody else. Jen, Terry McLaurin. Chris mentioned Terry McLaurin thriving with Taylor Heinicke at quarterback. He's actually the wide receiver 8 over the past 2 weeks. Is he a buy low target? Like, have people caught up to Terry McLaurin being back and the quarterback change being good for him? Is he someone you're targeting?
I actually have him. And so I'm thrilled that and he's a guy that you start every week, but you're, have been disappointed in the beginning part of the season. So I'm personally happy to see this. I don't know if I buy it yet. So, I think with the way things are, and all the buys coming up, I think he's probably a buy low guy, depending on what you're giving up for him. But, I have him, so I'm happy to see him doing well. Like I said, I'm not 100% sold that this is going to continue. I would love for it to, but I guess we'll see.
There's no way Wentz comes back, right, Jen? Like,
No.
They're not giving it back to Yosemite Wentz. There's no way. Chris, let's talk about your last quarterback.
Also, the last one, and this is, I would say, mostly narrative, but at least there is some data backing it. So looking at so it's Mac Jones versus the Colts. And for all intents and purposes, at least the way that the Colts have been behaving, it looks like they're waving the white flag on the season. I mean, they just fired their OC. They ship off Naheem Hines to the Buffalo Bills, and they get back Zach Moss in the deal. Jonathan Taylor himself is running on a bum ankle at this point. They have Sam Ehlinger in at quarterback. So all intents and purposes, this is a lost season for the Indianapolis Colts. Now enter the Patriots defense, who has essentially been able to not necessarily shut down, but at least force enough turnovers through interception, fumbles, and things of that nature against erratic quarterbacks in order to set up the Patriots on short fields. Just this past week, when the Patriots played the Jets, I mean, they were able to force enough turnovers or stall up enough drives that their starting position their average starting position on drives just this past week was on their own 43-yard line.
Average starting position. Chris, I love you, man. That's awesome. You brought average starting position to this podcast. I love it.
That's why, I mean, you got to dig deep for stuff like this, because if you just looked at the name and then you looked at the matchup, you're like, well, I'm not doing that. But at least, because of the defense, if they are set up with some of those short fields, could lead them to some short scores. We know that he's now targeting Jacoby Myers, Ramondre Stevenson, with Devontae Parker's knee banged up at this point. So at least if he can probably get in for a couple of short scores, I can see Mac Jones at least being at least a decent but deep streaming option for week 9.
So since I call Zach Wilson Zackety Zach, I can't call Mac Jones Mackety Mac, right? I can't do that.
You can't. Yeah, you got to do something. I mean, they're in this. Because they're in the same division and all that. You got to find something different. Right?
I think so too. I agree. I was playing with it, but I think you're right, Chris. I think it's dead wrong.
Point out one more thing about this graphic. They even do the little finger thing. Come on, man.
Yeah. It's almost dead on. I mean, I'm surprised there weren't any sort of copyright infringement or something like that.
I mean, they're doing the whole.
It's way too close.
Why is there not a photo of him inside with the stuffed animals in the closet?
At the very least, that's infringing on my childhood.
Right?
That picture right there, that's what that's doing right there. Yeah.
I love this. I love that Mac and Me is the most upsetting thing on this episode. Let's do Mac and Me as next week's Festivus, Jen. Let's do it. Yeah. Our job, we're gonna watch Mac and Me, and
I'm
then we'll
disturbed
come back and we'll talk
by just the still photo graphic. I'm very upset.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Real quick, MH just popped on. Not sure if you discussed these players yet. Cordero Patterson, Kyron Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Alan Lazard. Any better wide receivers, running backs on waivers? So check out our waiver episode that came out, I think, yesterday for sure, where they touch a little bit more on running backs and wide receivers. But I would say
I mean, I put up, I put up Hubbard in my stash article this week just because he was hurt last week, but the week before he was technically the starter. And, so we don't know if Foreman, we don't know if it's going to go back to a split. So I think if we're in a position where you need somebody, you need a body in there as your RB2 or 3, like I don't see how you don't grab him if he's ready to go.
Yep. I would definitely say go ahead and check out Sal already put it in the chat. But yeah, the waiver wire watch list written by John Daigle like every single week. But yeah, Kenyon Drake up at the very top, given Gus Edwards' injury. That should be like the top of everybody's list at this point. Jeff Wilson with his trade to the Dolphins. That should also be because most folks might have dropped him just given his situation in San Francisco with CMC coming over. And then Isaiah Pacheco. I know everybody's probably picked him up already, but we're seeing like more and more of him like over the last couple of weeks, and especially I think Kansas City is like a 10.5 point favorite or something along those lines against the Titans. And in positive game scripts, that's when we've seen Pacheco get the most of the carries like for Kansas City. So that's just a few running backs off the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. And receivers, Alec Pierce, if he's available, he's quietly getting 5 targets a game. So he's not a terrible option.
Terrace Marshall is a good deep guy.
Another good one.
But again, we don't really know who's on your wire. So it's, we're throwing
KJ Osborne with Adam Thielen's knee injury or something like that, if I remember correctly. Yeah, or ankle, whatever was wrong with Thielen after Sunday.
Sure. Okay, Jen, let's get to your tight end streamers because I want to hear about them.
Yeah, no, you really don't. Tight end this week is very ugly. So, you usually ask, is this a good week or a bad week?
Yep.
This is a bad week. There's a lot of ugliness at tight end. All the guys that I usually talk about on this podcast every Tuesday are now rostered beyond streaming, capacity at 40%. And so we're dipping into the ugly realm of tight end. But I do have 3 names for us this week. Not the best matchups for 2 of them. But all right, I'll start off. First guy is Tyler Conklin against the Bills. He is 12% rostered right now. Like I said, not a good matchup. The Bills are first against tight ends in scheduled adjusted fantasy points allowed. However, Conklin is coming off a tight end 1 outing. He had 10 targets last week. So him and Zach are
he blew up.
Are back in sync, I guess. And the Jets have gone more pass heavy, I assume, because Breece Hall is out, whatever reason, but they seem to be going more pass heavy. If that continues, Conklin, could be all right. Like I said, not a great matchup, but times are tough. So he's a body and he will probably get some volume. So that's my first guy.
Excellent. He's been good. It's hard to argue with picking up Tyler Conklin.
I had him and then I dropped him, and then how that goes. So I'm going to try to get him back this week if I can to replace. I think I have Greg Dulcich in that one league that is on a bye. All right. So second guy, once again, it's kind of iffy. A, iffy matchup. B, iffy guy in front of him, and that's Isaiah Likely. He's playing on the road against the Saints. He is 5% rostered. Mark Andrews is dealing with a shoulder and a knee injury from, the week prior. Not sure if his knee is full or not, back to health, but he also has a shoulder, which, Harbaugh says is not a real, not a big deal, but we don't know if that, how true that is. Likely put up, he had 6 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown in Andrews' absence last week. Saints, not a great matchup. They are tough versus tight ends as well, but unfortunately, it's going to be kind of a wait and see. I think it's one of those things, though, honestly, at this point with how bare tight end is, even if Andrews is a go, I mean, you can still throw Likely in there and hope he gets something, because I think, it's one of those things where you take the genie out of the bottle or the toothpaste out of the tube or whatever. Like, I don't see them just not playing Likely because Andrews is healthy. There's not a lot of pass catchers on that offense as it is, right? Rashad Bateman is out. I mean, we're looking at Deshaun Jackson, and then
James Prochet. Come on now.
Basically just Duvernay and Prochet are really the guys.
I think Likely actually has not a lot of tight end 2s have standalone value, but he actually may be one that'll have some, especially if they want to rest Andrews. Not sure. And it is a later game, which just makes that tough too. But he's my second.
Since you're talking Likely, just Daniel Long came in with a question, said Conklin over Likely if Andrews is out. So if we know Andrews is out going into Saturday, would you start Conklin or Likely?
If Andrews is out, I'd probably go Likely.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
You'd likely go Likely?
I'd likely go Likely. God, the likely puns on Twitter are brutal.
It's true.
They're about as bad as dad jokes.
They're bad. That one wasn't bad though, Chris. I have to say, like, I'm cool with it, but I see a lot of them. It's like, anyway. All right. Third and final guy, Logan Thomas, playing Minnesota. He is 6% rostered. So he came back last week. He was not targeted. However, he did run 20 routes of the 39 dropbacks. Hopefully it was kind of an easing in situation, and maybe this week he'll actually get targets. The Vikings are allowing 12 points, 12 adjusted fantasy points to the tight end position, which is the 7th highest. So it is a good matchup. And as you know, Chris has Heinicke in there as a streamer. We'll throw Logan Thomas in the mix. I mean, it's somewhat risky. Like I said, he didn't get one target last week, but he was out for, I think he's been out since week 4. So maybe it was an ease back in, and you could do worse, I guess.
You could do worse. Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Logan Thomas is an interesting option in general because he's been productive in the past and the offense is something a little better. But you're right. It's sure scary. I hope Conklin or likely are available.
Yeah, it's not, it's the better matchup of the 3, but it's definitely sketchy. Like, yeah, I mean, that's a deep league, a 16-teamer where there's nothing there and he's there, and like I said, with 6 teams on buys and players hurt all over the place, tight end is extremely gross. So it is what it is.
Is kicker any better?
Yes, kicker is actually pretty good this week. Are we going in? All right. So for the 900th time this season, Jake Elliott is my top streamer for the week. I mean, he's still only 27% rostered. He didn't have a great outing last week. I think he was kicker 18. However, this week he's in a great spot. They're playing in Houston. Right now, the Eagles are 2 touchdown favorites. It was at 13 this morning when I wrote my kicker streaming article, and it is now up to 14. So it's a 14-point spread for the Eagles, and they even now raised their team implied total 1 point as well. So they're at a 29.5, which is the second highest implied team total of the week. So Eagles, should put a lot of points on the board against Houston, and Jake Elliott should be there for that. And then as an added bonus, the Texans are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to kickers. So all the things add up. The process, Elliott is there. I know that you guys are sick of him. I'm sick of him, but it is what it is. It
baffles me that the Eagles kicker isn't on every roster. I have a ton of him, and I'm just keeping him.
And what's crazy is that when I was looking today, I was looking at the look ahead stuff, and I was looking for Graham Gano at the bottom. He's 60-something% rostered. I'm like, so you guys are rostering Graham Gano, and then the Eagles, one of the highest, the undefeated best team in the whatever. Anyway, I thought that was kind of crazy. So yeah, that's kicker 1. Kicker 2 is kind of rough, but I'm still, I have to go with my process because it's the same process I've been using for years. But We're looking at Dustin Hopkins / Taylor Bertolette / other. They are playing in Atlanta. Right now, Hopkins, I haven't seen anything yet as to whether he's coming back or not. I know he had that hammy and a bunch of other things, I guess. But and then Taylor Bertolette at the moment is still on the practice squad. He didn't. I don't know if they're going to elevate him, or they may bring in a veteran. We'll see. It's still early in the week. But either way, they're playing on the road in Atlanta. They are 3-point favorites with a 26.25 implied team total. Chargers, they haven't been great, but they're coming off a bye. They should be refreshed. Maybe they'll be ready to score some points. So he's my second guy. Really, they're not really in order. Let's just say that he's an option. Or they are an option.
I wanted to ask Chris real quick what he thinks of Herbert coming off a bye. You think he's a little healthier? Can we be optimistic that this offense will start humming again? Keenan Allen may be back. I know we're going to miss Mike Williams, but are you optimistic about Herbert getting back to where we expected Herbert to be for the rest of the season? Or do you think they're going to continue to struggle?
No, I think so. If Keenan Allen is back, then yes, it can come back to normal, because Keenan Allen is the type of receiver that makes that offense go. He doesn't make Herbert go. He makes that offense, that Joe Lombardi offense go, that requires those shorter to intermediate, crossing routes in order to convert on third downs, because outside of that, they haven't been able to do anything. They've been one of the most inefficient offenses on first and second down, because Herbert doesn't throw deep on first and second downs. I think he has one of the lowest average depths of target of any passer in the league, like on first and second down. Like
That's
he's throwing
surprising.
it's like 5.5 air yards like per attempt on first and second down, which is absolutely ridiculous considering he has a howitzer attached to his right shoulder. So if he does have Keenan Allen back and they still are put back into those like 3rd and 5, 3rd and 7 like type situations, Keenan Allen's the type of receiver that she would lean on in order to create separation to convert on those types of attempts. It's not going to be Mike Williams. I mean, one, because he's injured, and that's not the archetype of player Mike Williams is. That's not the type of player Josh Palmer is. It's not the type of player DeAndre Carter is. Not the type of player Gerald Everett is. So like that offense needs Keenan Allen. So if he's back, then yes, I think Herbert can get back to like where he's at. If not, it's going to be another rough outing.
It'll be the Austin Eckler show if he's not back, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, I like this. My 4-for-4 staff dynasty team is very Herbert and Allen centric, so I'm hoping hoping to come back. So Jen, I'm sorry I cut you off. You've got two more kickers for us.
Yeah. I'll go quick. Third guy, Matt Prater against Seattle. Remember we highlighted this game in week 6 as a big shootout, and then Matt Prater didn't end up going. It was Matt Amendola and whatever, but. Back the same matchup again. This time in Arizona, the Cardinals are favored by 2, which I think is kind of, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but they are. And they are their team implied total is 26.25. So I mean, decent matchup. He's only 9% rostered. Matt Prater is usually pretty solid. So if he's there, I think he's a good option. And then fourth and final bonus is our boy Jason Sanders, just because they're on the road in Chicago. He's only 17% rostered. Miami's a 5-point favorite in this one as the road favorite. Their team implied total is not fantastic, 24.5, but I think it's the Dolphins. They've found a way to score points all season, and they've been playing well, and Chicago is not. So there we go.
Offense is humming. That give me Tua. Give me that offense. Jalen Waddle out
all
there.
Of it.
Yeah. I love it. No, those are great options. I can't believe Jason Sanders and Matt Prater are that low, Ross.
I know. I don't really know what's going on with people. Like every time I go to write my article and I pull it up and I'm always just confused at I don't know. I think, we know the deal. People don't care about kickers and they just go by kind of names and, they'll have Young Wei Koo, and the names that they're used to, and they just kind of ignore, so, but yeah, I mean, those guys are all fantastic options. Not fantastic, but they're all good options this week if you need them.
Excellent. Jelly of the month just asked. They've got Mark Andrews trying to pick up Isaiah Likely or Juwan Johnson. Since they're both Monday night, need to drop someone, Wan'Dale Robinson or Rashad Bateman. Chris, you first. Would you drop Wan'Dale Robinson or Rashad Bateman to pick up a tight end rental?
I think at this point, you're probably safe to drop Rashad Bateman. It's sounding like, at least when him re-aggravating his Liz Frank injury this past week, at best, he looks like he's going to miss another at least 1 to 2 weeks. If not, he'll be shut down for a little bit longer. So, with Wan'Dale actually not having any setbacks over the past couple weeks over his hamstring injury that kept him out for a while, Daniel Jones starting to trust him a bit more as a pass catcher, I would lean more towards holding Wan'Dale, even though they're on bye this week. But I think even when they come back, they have a decent stretch of games for the next couple of weeks. So they play the Texans coming out of their bye, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, so not a bad at least short-term stretch of games for the Giants coming out of their bye. So I'd hold on to Wan'Dale.
I'm sad to agree with you, but I do agree with you just because I love Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, it's just another season for him, and that sucks.
I like jelly. I wonder what kind of jelly of the month we're talking.
Yeah, is it? And I wonder if it's like a spicy jelly, like a habanero jelly, or if it's like straight up fruit,
like fancy, craft jellies, or what?
That's a thing, craft jelly.
I don't know. I just made it up, but
I was about to say I'm going to Google that.
Artisanal jellies. I'm sure it's a thing.
Oh yeah, Charlie the Bacon Guy, meet jelly of the month.
Yeah, exactly. Meet jelly of the month. That's some bacon jelly for jelly of the month. Absolutely. Yeah. Christmas vacation. That's right. Christmas vacation. Shout out to that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I forgot all about that.
I did too.
I'm kind of ashamed of myself for forgetting.
I am too.
Yeah. We were just talking about classic movies with E.T. and all that stuff.
I went straight to
jelly
just
of the month
food and not thinking about
I know that's the fat kid in me. Just oh yeah, jelly. Oh really?
Yeah.
Dana Duong, I agree. I'm a little worried about Wan'Dale's snap count as well, but I do think that when he's on the field, he's getting looks, which is interesting to me. So Wan'Dale isn't somebody that I'm running out to make sure that I'm starting him every week, but I like rostering him where I can. So that's my thoughts, Daniel. Defense streamers of the week. It's a bad week to stream defenses. I'm just going to be honest. Like it's kind of gross. I don't really like any of these options that much, but if you need to do something, then here's what I like. I would say the Seattle Seahawks are an interesting option this week. They're playing the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, I like the Arizona offense, so it's not a great matchup, but they did just shut Arizona down a couple weeks ago, obviously out without DeAndre Hopkins. Seahawks are quietly the defense 6 on the season. They've got a young secondary. They're playing opportunistically, led by the rookie Tariq Woolen, who I love. He's got 4 picks, tied for the league lead. Last time they met Arizona, they were the defense 2. Arizona, Hopkins looks good, but they don't look right offensively. And the offensive line isn't playing great. Like 3 other starters are questionable going into the week. So I think that Seattle, with the young pass rusher Boye Mafe, who just got his 2nd sack this week, and the interior rush that they're getting with guys like Poona Ford, I think they'll be able to do just enough to create some turnovers, which I like. They had 5 sacks last week. Cardinals are 10th in sacks allowed, so there's something there. So I like that. Chiefs versus Titans. This one is kind of a matchup-based thing. The Chiefs' defense isn't good. The Titans, however, they got hurt Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis, who look terrible. And then most importantly, the Chiefs, they're actually 3rd in the league in rushing yards allowed per game. Part of that is game script, but a lot of that is just that they struggle to stop the run. They've got guys that get after the quarterback. They got athletic, rangy linebackers, and they don't, Nick Bolton's really the only run stopper on that defense. So if they can hold, because they just held Jonathan Taylor to 3.4 yards per carry, Austin Eckler to 2.8 yards per carry. So if they could hold Derrick Henry to like a modest outing and force Malik Willis or Ryan Tannehill to pass, then I think that they may come out and be able to get some of those turnovers and some of those sacks that I'm looking at. So control the pace is going to be important. I don't love them, but the Titans are only 24th in points per game. There's some questions going. So the Chiefs, if you're desperate, I think are out there. And then Vikings at the Commanders. I'm with Chris that I like Taylor Heinicke a lot. What he's done, at least within the realm of Taylor Heinicke, I like him a lot. Vikings defense 14 on the season. They're not bad. Washington's 4th in sacks allowed, and Zadarius Smith is tied for the league lead with 8.5 sacks with Matthew Judon. Tied for 2nd in the league in turnover differential, tied for 6th in turnovers, including 7 interceptions. Colts struggled against Washington last week, but Green Bay was the defense 9 2 weeks ago with Heinicke under center. So Vikings, if you need them, they haven't been a great defense. They've got holes, they've got problems, but if you need a defense and you can't get Seattle, then the Vikings I like just as much as the Chiefs in this situation. But again, not a great week to go after it. Jen, I want to get your take on Minnesota real quick before we go. They are the quietest 6-1 in the league right now, and I don't feel like either offense or defense they're really lighting things up. They're just coming away with victories. What's your take on Minnesota?
I think it's just always they seem to always be that way. I think it's like the Kirk Cousins thing. Like nobody takes him seriously, nobody takes them seriously. I'm sure they like it that way, but I think that there's a lot going on in that division that is taking more of the focus away, right? You've got the implosion of Green Bay. You've got, the Bears, like what's going, and you also have the Lions kind of have their own stuff. So I feel like they're just kind of getting lost in the shuffle, which I'm sure they like it that way. But, they have very good pieces, on both sides of the ball. So it's not surprising. I just think they're kind of that team that always, no one really pays attention unless you're in Minnesota.
I agree. They're kind of interesting to keep an eye on, especially with the offensive talent they have there. Chris, daggers, real quick before we go. How much fab would you spend on Evan Ingram this week? Sal was kind enough to say about 5 to 10% of the budget. That's probably close to what's in our waiver wire article. Do you agree with that, Chris and Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Evan Ingram right now over the past few weeks, 3rd on the team in routes run, just with also, let's see, close to is he leading the team in targets? Let me go ahead and check. Let's see. Yeah, he's tied for actually he is leading the team in targets over the past month of play. So yeah, no, I'm with that for sure. I mean, will they continue because he plays the tight end position? Who knows? But the team needs pass catchers at this point. Can't always just be Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne. So yeah, I'm with it.
Excellent. Jen, you buying Evan Ingram there?
Oh yeah. I mean, I he's quietly been pretty good. And now, as I said, he is above the rosterable streaming qualifications, so I can't list him anymore.
Mhm.
But I'm happy because I have him on a lot of best ball teams. So just let
Good.
that continue to ride and go.
Good. I'm happy for Evan Ingram. All that he's kind of gone through after that great rookie season he had. Like, I'm happy for Evan Ingram. I hope he thrives there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris and Jen. Always a pleasure. Thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Any final thoughts before we go, Chris, Jen?
I got one more.
Okay.
So Justin Fields like rostership is like sitting right at like on the edge of my typical threshold. I think he was at like 41, like 43%, like somewhere in there. So he couldn't be included in the streaming column, but like if he's out there in your league, he's the slam dunk play like for this
He's
week.
been good.
And, yeah, he's been good. In the past month, or no, in the first month of the season, he was bottom 5 in completion percentage over expected and EPA per play. In the last 4 weeks, he's been top 12 in EPA per play and league average in CPOE. So he's improving as a passer. And oh, by the way, he's like averaging like about 5 rushing attempts like per game as well. Designed rushing attempts. Like Matt Eberflus has actually figured out he has an athletic passer like under center, and he actually wants to use him that way. So
it's great. They're moving him outside of the pocket. It's great.
Yep, going up against y'all's Dolphins like this weekend. I mean, it's definitely a decent matchup. I'm not expecting anything from Chase Claypool, but at the very least, if Justin Fields can continue doing things with the current set of personnel that he has for Week 9, he would be the top streamer if he was if he met the threshold requirements.
Yeah, and we'll just hope Bradley Chubb doesn't take his head off. That's what we'll hope. So
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much again. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, listeners. You can follow us on Twitter at Jen Eakins NFL, at Chris Allen FFWX, and at 2 Guys Brandon. Thanks so much for checking us out and have a good day.